Hello. Ayush and Senthil, are you able to hear me?
Hello, yes, Ruby.
Yes, Nurbi, I can hear you. Hi,
Okay,
Sandeep.
hello, good morning. We'll be starting in the next 5 minutes. Let's just wait 2 more minutes, to for people to join in. We can start then.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We are starting in the next 2 minutes. Please feel free to drop in your questions if you have any. Uh, Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us for the second episode of OpsLyft webinar series. We are really excited to host you this afternoon. If you have any questions for your speakers during the event, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We would be more than happy to address each one of you at the end of the event. So as we start, I would like to say that there was a time when businesses and companies were just completely and solely focused on creating products with flawless coding. I mean, we all know that implementing the best technology practices is crucial to building an advanced product. But what if your users are not able to completely make use of the great tech you have built for them? As we all can very well see that focusing more on tech and less on usability is not the trend anymore. And the growing importance of design in the tech world is today is evidently visible to all of us. Now, the real question here is how do we achieve the goal of designing for impact and showcase technology in such a way that it feels natural to each and every single user of your product. Today's episode is all about diving deeper into user experience, what it is, how the process looks like, the best practices, and much more on this episode, how building effective user experience drives observability. With Ayush Kumar, our CEO and founders at OpsLyft, and a very prestigious guest speaker for the day, Senthil Shanmugam, Senior Director and Global Head of Product Design at Birdeye. Senthil has more than 10 years of experience in product design and has designed products for SaaS, healthcare, and much more. He has led design teams, built practices, and mentored design students. He has a keen interest in startups and advised various startups around his experience in user experience, product design management, product strategy, and human-centered design. A very warm welcome, Senthil and Ayush. We are really excited to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Shruti.
Thanks, Surbi, for that introduction.
Okay, so let's, so Senthil, I'd like to start, with asking you that as most of us here know, user experience focuses on fully understanding how users interact with a product. So given your experience, years of experience in the field, what do you think is the first basic need for building an effective user experience?
Awesome. First of all, thank you folks for joining on a Saturday. I just wanted to, I might like look towards the right. So I have my monitor there. So I pardon me there if I'm not looking at the screen directly. That also part of the user experience. So absolutely, should be. Let me share my experience. I've been practicing design for 10 plus years, like you said, from different verticals. Like going back to your question, like I like the way you framed effective user experience, right? Like you articulated it extremely well. So thanks for asking that question, by the way. Let's double click on the effective part. So that like I don't want to talk about, there is plethora of good practices out there in the Google and like from different practitioners, but I wanted to make it real in this session. Like feel free to drop me if you have more questions, right? So double clicking on the effective part, I would probably start talking about the seamless effective user experience, right? So when we say the seamless part is like, I would double click on integrating experience is more important than beautiful in product experience, right? Let's talk about what is integrated experience, right? Like uh, uh, so when we talk about integrated experience, like we always focus on like, hey, like how will the user comes to my product, what is the user journey will look like, what are the areas like we can improve in their frictionless onboarding, whatnot, right? So now that the world is revolving around, our users are using tons of tools to everyday things, like rather than we are keep on bugging them or pulling them to our product, can we go where they are actually, right? So that is where I wanted to emphasis on integrating experience part, right? So why integrated experience is important? Integrated experience will give you more adoption equal to more retention equal to more ACV, right? I know I'm talking about the business language, but why it's very, very critical, like when we talk about user experience, not just thinking about our product user experience, we should solely apply where they are spending most of their time if they are in everyday things, right? Like I, as a DevOps engineer, spend most of my time collaborating with my peers in a Slack. Why not we go there rather than we bring them to our platform, right? Since most company focuses are like nowadays like entirely on a SaaS platform, they've been like kind of hopping onto different tools now and then to monitor their systems, like rather than going to one platform to kind of get this holistic bird eye view of what their system and how it's performing, right? So I really wanted to focus on not just your product experience. Let's talk about end-to-end user experience, like where they're getting their emails, how are they getting notified, why should they even come, like can they solve that particular problem within where they are, where they spend most of their time. All of this is very, very important nuance informations by understanding our users, right? So it's not, I just wanted to talk about talking to users, shadowing them, certainly not help you to ground yourself with the user's needs. You need to understand like what are they trying to accomplish by using your tool, right? I certainly don't want to bring everybody. User experience is not just your UX designer's problem anymore. It's everybody's problem. So of course, I'm not saying that you should get your peers, drop everything and start designing your experience. But co-creation is very important. So working with your PMs, PMMs, and your designers and the engineers, making sure now that your PMs and the engineers are very well aware of what the user needs, and like, is there a way we can go where they are rather than just like we constantly pushing like, hey, this is what you need to focus on. This is every tool, like almost like average an end user, I as a designer use like to be precise, like 18 tool in a given day. Every tool is trying to push me some information to me saying like you should be focusing on this, right? where most of the time I'll be spending on Figma and the Slack. So this is what I would like to double click when we talk about effective user experience, Shruti.
Yeah, well, thank you, Senthil. It's really interesting to hear, about how to build an impact through design. It is an overall team process, and it requires a deep insight into the needs of users and also, in some cases, their limitations. On that note, Ayush, I would like to ask you, how do you define user experience? Like, what's the perception of the product team at OpsLyft, and is the goal to meet the exact needs of the customer without any fuss or bother, or like how is it you see user experience at OpsLyft? Yep.
Understood. Thank you for that question, Surbi. I think as to what I would say, Senthil like rightly mentioned, right, that a user experience is not just I would say a single a designer's problem anymore, right? It is not how we basically see digital products in today's world, right? So I might not be well aware of, I would say, the much more details of, I would say, the UX, but I'd like to kind of from a thought process perspective, I think how we perceive user experience at OpsLyft, right? Like, first of all, it's definitely a collaborative process, as to what I think Senthil also mentors us. So that's what something that we have kind of like really learned well, as and from a, I would say, experience perspective, what are, I would say, accomplishment or I would say the perseverance towards like design is, right, is that the products that we sort of like really release out to our users, right, it should feel like a natural extension to what they kind of like really do in their day-to-day lives, right? I think that's what we strive to kind of really get with respect to our experience that the like user is getting like from our product in any format. As to what I think like Senthil also mentioned, right, that our experiences of today like should be like really focused on like to be delivered where the user is, rather than basically getting them to a particular point where we want them to be. I think that might be the Steve Jobs shit altogether, that he was able to kind of like really pull off with respect to his products. Like, but then that's obviously, one in a generation case that we like really see that, okay, hey, can we like really, build altogether something very different, but that's always an exception, in my opinion, right? The usual, I think the best practice that we also like kind of wholeheartedly support, like with respect to any, I would say, function that like involves creating experience for the user, right, is to kind of like be where their users are. So I think like with respect to our product, right, like given that our product is like specifically used by DevOps engineers, engineering managers, and to some extent the CTOs of the companies as well, right? So like with respect to each persona, we basically have our experience like right? An engineer is basically like spending with respect to the problem statements that we address is spending basically most of his time on analytics dashboards where he's analyzing costs, he's crunching numbers, and he's figuring out the insights. So that experience of basically giving a dashboard experience to basically the user, which could simplify his or her work to kind of like really get the analytical job done, right? So that experience is sort of like very much helpful. Now when it comes to, I would say, the engineering manager persona people, right, for them, I think they have to kind of like really manage about that how is the overall governance of the DevOps processes that is sort of like looking like, which they're trying to accomplish through our systems in place, right? So for them, I think a project manager experience that should be embedded in their own Jira or I would say Slack as well. That experience sort of like we try to like really create, right? It's not that they have to kind of like really log in into our platform only, and then only they can like really go ahead and manage their I would say project management with respect to the DevOps functions that we cater with respect to our product, right? If Jira and Slack is supposed to be basically their operating methods with respect to their project management, right? Excuse me. So I think if that experience we can basically give into our product, and then like reversing it all together. So I think that kind of like really helps to move things faster and like help them kind of getting the job done faster and easier, for that matter. And same with respect to, I would say, the CTO's persona as well, right? I mean, so for them, I think the reporting and the email experience is sort of like working out. I mean, It's like they don't have to kind of like log in upon the dashboards and then go ahead and like really do tons of different stuff to kind of like get that one single sentence that, okay, hey, is basically this system or the process in place is actually moving that moving basically the numbers up for that needle moving metric for me, right? So I think like simplifying that experience and like really showing that one liner single sentence that, okay, hey, the overall impact of this entire system that is being deployed is basically moving this important company wide, like I would say, technology metric in place, right? So I think experiences such as these is something that we kind of like really figure out like hard by interviewing the users like on a daily basis, I would say, right? And that is how I think should be that how we perceive user experience in general here at OpsLyft, like throughout, I think, our engineering and product teams, to be specific. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Ayush. That really gave us a sense of what a design-driven culture could really mean for young and high-growth startups such as OpsLyft. So moving ahead, I would like to know from you, Senthil, what does the US design process really look like? I mean, are there any basic phases of the US design process you and your team follow at Birdeye?
Uh, sure. Yeah, I can share like what we practice here. Like there is no one silver bullet answer for this, Shubhi, but I can certainly double click on going back to what Ayush just mentioned, like the personas and ICPs. We certainly focus on the segments and the personas and the ideal customer profile. Like what are they trying to accomplish by using our tool, and why should they be using even our tool at all, right? So we wanted to understand where in their journey this particular product will fits in, and like what are they trying to accomplish, right? For example, like I wanted to talk about the blueprint which we follow here. So the user journey mapping, like which clearly talks about like where all the kind of like the nudges we can create, how are they using our product, what are the products they use in every given day, and like what are they trying to accomplish. So are we being part of their top 5 things which they matters every day, for what persona? If yes, what is that persona we are targeting, and why should we even going back to my previous point, bring all those ICPs or the personas to our platform? Can't we just go there, right? So when it comes to the process question, like we follow the discoverability is the most important piece in our the larger gamut of things. We spend most of our time in ideation and discoverability, while by talking to our users, by making sure we are shadowing them, and certainly talking to users are not user research, right? Like, so we try and probe them, like why they wanted to use it, what is the value they're seeing it, and should they even use it. People, customers generally say, yes, this is going to make my life easier, but they'll not end up using it, right? So we wanted to be, how is this going to help your everyday things? Like, what is your adoption strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? So there are different ways in which like we try and probe them before we get into our solutioning. So grounding ourselves with the problem statement and the users will certainly help us to narrow down the solution. And of course, like talking to different segments and different personas will certainly helps us bring ground ourselves in framing the problem into the customer language, right? That is the most critical part, folks. Like making sure that we are framing the problem statement not as a feature request, and in the customer language, why they are facing this problem, why should we even solve this, right? So that is the most important piece. Like, of course, like how are we going to mitigate that? Like, is it going to work or not, right? So so in this go to market world, like we wanted to really go faster and fail fast, and like kind of like go back to our drawing board again. There is in a small startups or like early startups, we don't have a luxury to fail, right? So we have to be making sure that like we have to nail the problem right. So before we hit the engineering, we wanted to make sure that how are we going to, what is the success metric will look like, right? So are we going to talk to this persona, and like are they going to use it, right? So there is a very small thin a layer of failing possibility. Like we have to really focus on this adoption piece. So design now started talking about the adoption and the retention more than the look and feel, right? So we really want to make sure our success metrics and all of that aligned towards the adoption, aligned towards the retention. More retention equal to more ACV, right? So our practice always revolves around the adoption and the experience and then like the retention, right? So we measure our design by the adoption metrics. So this is the process we follow should be here. But like there are certain frameworks out there, like every company follows different framework. I don't want to talk about the framework exactly what are the steps we use in our organization, but the success, how do we measure the success is what I wanted to talk about. So if you start focusing on the endpoint, I think the process should help us to reach that the goal in a easier way. That is, the process should help us, like rather than fixing a process and following that strictly, and it doesn't mean to an end, right? So I really wanted you to focus on the adoption metrics and the retention metrics more than that gives. So if somebody is spending most of their time in your product, which means they're certainly enjoying the value you're creating for them, right? So that definitely comes with the experience, not just the beautifully simple UI. That's also experience starts from the notification, email, and all the touch points which you are interacting with your end user.
Glad you shared that, Senthil. That really gave us, an understanding of how every step in the UX cycle, from researching into the user's needs and to producing the final working product, carries its own importance. So I would like to stretch this a bit and ask you, Ayush, like in DevOps, like if we particularly talk about the DevOps space, one of the biggest challenges of observability is that someone such as an engineer or a person from the DevOps team needs to do the actual observing. So just to elaborate a little bit, when there is a problem, observability tools are great at providing access and drill down capabilities to a huge amount of useful information. But it ends with the engineer sifting through and interpreting the information and then deciding where to go next in the hunt to determine the root cause. So this takes a lot of skill, time, patience, and experience. So do you think this challenge of observability can be solved by building an effective user experience?
Understood. Thanks for that question, Surbhi. I think a very, I would say, like pinpointed question, or rather, I would say, like very, I would say prominent question in that sense that this is the actual problem of the users, like Surbhi, that currently, that we are solving for at OpsLyft, right? And we in fact like solved it basically by offering a different experience only. I think that is also the answer like to the question that you kind of like also like pointed out, right? So I think how we like really saw this like in at least in our basically thesis with respect to solution to the problems that we are basically solving, right? That I would say engineer who is basically directly or indirectly working with basically the cloud, right? He or she is like definitely using at an average 5 different, I would say, observability products, which is able to help him or her to I would say make decisions with respect to the infrastructure management, right? That's the, I would say, the fact that we like sort of like drill down upon after doing our like user research by speaking with a number of people, right? Now here is basically like the next problem was that it's not about that the user is having a problem with respect to like, let's say, like having a 5 different products in front of basically him, right? As Senthil also mentioned that, let's say he has like 18 different products that he could potentially use in a particular day, right? The real problem that we like sort of like really notice, right, because of our habit of continuously asking the whys until we get to that particular fact, right? The like real problem that the user like really like was facing, right? That it's not about like, let's say there is this product 1 P1 to basically P5, right? It's not about switching tabs between these products. It's about correlating information between these products, and that like figure out that one action item, like that what we could like we have to typically do, right? Imagine from this perspective, I think like we are in basically the cost management business altogether, right? So I think for us, like this became a problem when we spoke basically to our users that, okay, hey, if you have to like, let's say downsize a particular instance altogether, right? Then the steps that I would say a user typically has to do, he would first like look at, that, okay, hey, this I have to like downsize let's say these list of, these 5 instances. Why? Because the cost of these instances are supposed to be high. Okay, now why the cost is high? It's like for that, he or she would have to kind of like really check the usage. Like checking the usage, go on a different system altogether, right? After checking the system, like register that information like of the usage patterns altogether. Now the next step would be, okay, check if basically is there any critical deployment or what sort of deployment is running on this particular machine, right? Okay, I use the usage pattern data like that I got from here, check with basically what's my deployment type, like really running on these set of particular instances, see if the, I would say like the load on this particular I would say system in terms of, I would say, the usage, right? That data also has to be like gotten from somewhere else, right? And like now combining all of these things together and then making a decision out that, okay, hey, if let's say this machine X is hosting this A kind of application, which is experiencing this Y kind of load and is also basically experiencing this Z kind of usage. So now if I have all this information together, right? Okay, what is the next best basically right sizing I would say action should I like really take, or should I not do right sizing at all, right? So and this actual piece of, I would say bringing all this information together and then working on this information, creating that insight all together, right? That was the actual problem of our users, and that was the observability problem for us. Like that was what observability like really meant like for us at the end of the day, that what is something that we were solving for the user at the end of the day, right? So and that is where what I think Surbi like mentioned, right? What we sort of like we really figured out, like how do we kind of like really build out an experience of it, right? We wanted to kind of like reduce all this, I would say, entirety of the process of the user in such a way that, okay, hey, why don't we let's basically go here to a place wherein the user only has to only see the action item, or the basically action items only that what he or she like really needs to do, rather than basically correlating the information from 10 different places, right? And that is why we decided, like from an experience perspective, that we would not be focused on typically giving I would say the value in form of, I would say, analytics and dashboards per se, but rather we'd be basically creating insights out of it, right? And publishing it basically to the user through their preferred means of, I would say, day-to-day communication, like basically adding the Sentinel's point wherein like publishing this information piece where the user is exactly, either through Slack or maybe like even through GitHub pull requests, even through email, etc., right? So that is what basically our observability like I would say meaning was, that what is the observability problem that we saw like within our users, right? And how we basically solved from a different experience perspective, right? And that's sort of like also working. I think our highest like I would say adoption and also basically highest ACV feature as well is basically cost saving insights only. I think that's what basically makes us I would say a very differentiated product as well into the market, wherein that we offer a dashboardless experience to basically, I would say, our end users at the end of the day, because they're able to like use a product in form of consumable insights that are very actionable in nature. And that is what then our metric also like really becomes, that how can we like really because our as Sentinel mentioned, right, the more the, I would say, adoption of a particular, I would say like experience, the better ACV it would be, right? So then our adoption metric also like really became like this itself with respect to insights, right? That, okay, hey, if our quality of insights basically keeps on improving, right, the more basically it would be used at the end user, for him or her to kind of like really generate value out of it, right? So that is what we basically kept our success metric as well with respect to our experience, that, okay, if let's say out of the 10 insights that we publish, right, if the 70% of insights basically are consumable in nature, a user is able to act on them, right? That is like at the end of the day is basically means more adoption to us, and that's our, I would say, repeatable adoption in nature, right? That a user would actually kind of like wait to basically get those next set of basically insights, because that is able to like help the user or him or her to kind of like really get something like done inside basically his or her organization with less time and effort, and with much more, I would say, higher efficiency like in output as well, right? So that's what I think like our, I would say, thesis is Surbi, with respect to how we perceive observability, how we saw basically observability as a problem, and what exactly the problem was, and then how we kind of like solved it through from a UX perspective, and how do we kind of like measure it as well in terms of quality and adoption, which brings in revenue.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Ayush. I think it's all about if in one click the users can easily answer certain questions in their minds and obtain full observability over a platform. So moving ahead, I'd like to quote Frank Reno, one of the best product leaders in the industry. According to him, observability isn't a feature you can install or a service you can subscribe to. Observability is something you either have or you don't. So what Senthil, I think directing this question to you, I think what makes the user experience great is when it is able to drive observability for the users. So let's talk about observability a little bit more here. According to you, what is observability? Why is it important? And what can it actually help organizations achieve? So yeah. And do you think
Sure.
this level of observability can be driven by building an effective UX?
Absolutely, 100% agree on that, Shrubi. Let me walk you guys through with a real example, right? So I couldn't agree more with Ayush on the statements he have made. Like, it's definitely first of all, it's quite a mouthful, and like it's a lot of insights for the DevOps team. But like, let me mellow it down from the user's perspective on that, Ayush. Like, I think like Googlers say, like speed and reliability is not a feature anymore. It's a norm, right? So we don't have to sell the reliability. Our uptime is 99.9 anymore. It's a stable stake, folks. Like, so how do we make sure that it's impacting the users, right? I often think when there is a downtime, I hear from my organization, like we as a designers, like including myself, don't feel the pain. Oh, that's not my problem, right? So let me give you a real example how it's actually impacted not just the downtime, our DevOps team, our reliability. It also impacted our internal team's user experience, right? I was chatting with my friend from Amazon AWS. He was a lead architect in Seattle for S3 bucket, right? So he was like giving a real example, like stating from the past. Amazon web services, when it went down in the March 2017, it lost almost 150, $160 million just in that day, right? So it's not just the business and the revenue impacting metrics, how it's impacted in everyday things as a R&D function, right? So what they really worried about then, not making that system up and live running, that is the most important P0s. Of course, the most time they spent after that incident is explaining why it happened, right? Creating the knowledge base, getting into a very big organizations with their CTOs, with their DevOps team, explaining the situation, why it happened. They spent almost 4 months just explaining what happened on that day, right? So if what is eventually identify the time spent on giving the justification why it happened is more valued than the actual day it impacted the business, right? So this is itself a user experience, folks. It's not the downtime alone. So the PMs and PMMs, the designers trying to explain why it happened, how we're going to regain that reliability and the trust from the potential prospect or the existing customer, which created a lot of inbound roadmap just to solve that alone. So I want us to focus on more on how are we making sure that we are gaining the trust and always making sure this uptime is always available, right? For an end user, it's mostly all the time like they expect, yeah, my system to up and running like as I expected, and I'm just a tab away or a interface away to experience this, like whether my interface is slow or like not giving the right expected outputs. So it's very critical when it comes to observability in user experience, right? So I call it as tossing application. As an end user, like a DevOps engineer, when there is an incident happening, I'll be like going to multiple tools to identify why it happened. So OpsLyft, like trying to solve the problem in a clean, A, being proactive on that front, B, having a single source of truth for us to identify why this happened, right? And like we should also start measuring how it's going to impact the end user. It's not just the insight only on the revenue, insight on the trust, right? Like how it's going to impact on the trust factor, right? So this is very, very, very critical, folks. Like after the pandemic, teams are tossing between tools to identify the root cause and trying to publish that in like if there is any downtime. So observability, I would probably put as a P0 when it comes to the user experience, making sure that A, trying to avoid the incident, B, trying to be a little proactive about it, and making sure like how can we avoid this and like try and be as much as explicit about to our end user. So a lot more opportunity for us to improve there, like being proactive, but uh, almost like 55% of a user, when there is a even an internet issue, they started blaming the provider. They're like either they're slow or the API is not performing well, right? So this became a the existing mental model for our end user, saying this is not their problem, this is the service provider's problem, right? So I think like I wanted to touch upon that rather than like fixing multiple and creating a one single source of truth. Is there a way we can be a little proactive so that we avoid being justifying like why it's even went out, right? So this is what I want to focus on when we talk about user experience and the observability, should we?
Thanks for sharing that, Senthil. I would totally agree with you. You know, as you said, the goal of observability is to understand what's happening across all these environments so you can keep your systems efficient and reliable and your customers happy. So on that note, we would love if you could share some of the best UX practices according to you. If implemented, will improve the quality of the user's interaction and enhance their perceptions of a brand and its product.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, so I think it's not about screen designing or beautiful copy or beautifully simple UI. It's beyond that, folks. Like I would probably frame it as a experience flywheel, like not just the interface flywheel, right? Like we talked about the integrated experience, like how we can have an integrated experience where the users are. That is also part of the user experience, not just focusing on your product experience. Can we talk about the end-to-end user experience, how they are actually what do they do like in a given day? What are the top 5 things they do when they open their laptop? How are they getting notified? Is there a way we can like not bombard them with notification? Most of our end users now, there is a new pattern of people turning off all the notifications, right? So that like they don't bombard it with like Instagram notification, WhatsApp notification, including like OpsLyft notification, right? So there are too many notifications like for me to consume. How do I even prioritize? Like there is a lot of cognitive load for me to identify what is P0, what is like casual message and stuff like that. So talking about this end-to-end experience, is there a consolidated way we can notify them? How can we only kind of barge into their everyday things when there is absolute incident happen, right? And I would also want all of us to focus on the PLG, which is the most important part, the product-led growth, right? So acquisition, self-onboarding, product activation, adoption, monetization, and the expansion, right? So why, let's say I started using OpsLyft for today to understand my infra, whether it's up and live working or not. I will also be using Amazon S3. I will be also using a couple of other service providers, right? So is there a way we can consolidate and also try and give them one single source of truth? So the PLG part is most important on the user experience, other than the integrated experience. And also there is a bi-directional piece which I wanted to talk about. So it's not just pushing information. Is there a way they can take action from where they are? Right? So it's not like one-way communication. Can I just approve, let's say like I as a CTO persona, can I approve in the Slack? Can I just monetize or like see an insight through Slack instead of me taking my user to the interface? There is a bi-directional integration is also a critical piece, like when it comes to user experience. So I'll say 3 things, folks. Like one is this bi-directional integration experience and the PLG and the experience flywheel. Create those experience flywheel for your entire business based on the segments, based on the persona. That will certainly give you that areas where you can nudge or create that informations for your users to take an action to deliver a world-class work, like what they're trying to accomplish through any part of the tool which they're using.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your experience, Senthil. Those were some really good insights which can help teams to foresee the diverse situations and effectively solve for them. So, yeah, coming to an end of our discussion, we always follow this as our ritual in each of our webinar episodes and ask our speakers if they have any, final tips and tricks or any of their favorite books and resources to share that, could help the product managers and designers in our audience to excel in their particular roles. So yeah, any one of you, like Senthil, we would like to start with you if you have any good books or resources you would like to share with us.
Oh, absolutely. So I would probably start with saying this word, like it's not a B2B, B2C, folks. It's a human to human, edge to edge. So people are using Slacks and Amazon Web Services and WhatsApp, Instagram. So they don't differentiate these tools in their brain like it's us. Like we do this differentiate this experience in our world. But going back to the recommendations, I would probably start with the book called Hooked by Miriel. Like it's definitely helpful. It's a, I would say, like I want each one of you to read if you are really excited how to make a hooked experience uh, to your tool, right? So going back to what I just mentioned, the moment they get hooked, which means it's more adoption. More adoption is equal to more retention equal to more ACV. So all you have to measure how hooked they are into your product, or rather you go where they are actually hooked already are, right? So I would probably start with that book. And one more recommendation, the Rocket Surgery made easy by Steve Kirk. That is also a pretty good book, and very relevant book for this forum is the Phoenix Project. So which I did read when I was working in my previous organization on the working on the IT operations and dev operations as SaaS application management, SaaS operations. So that certainly kind of opened a floodgate for me to understand the IT world, how they're actually form a mental model in their everyday things. So these are the three books I would highly recommend, folks.
Thanks, Senthil. Ayush, anything you would like to share with us?
I think I do not have an exhaustive list of books, Surbi, but I think amongst the books, I think that Senthil mentioned, right? Hooked is, I think, by far my favorite as well. That is, I think, the only I would say book which is focused on, I would say, which is inclusive of, I would say, user experience is something that I've read thoroughly, right? And I can't stress enough about basically that book, right? I think I think if I remember correctly, it's Senthil, correct me if I'm wrong, it like calls it desire manufacturing, right? It's like that is.
Yes.
So I think that is one of the beautiful concepts that I think they have mentioned a 4-step model, which like they really, it was, I think, a trigger, like action, reward, and investment. I think this 4 steps, right, which they like really use to kind of like manufacture desires within the user to like really use the products, right? And that is very hard to kind of like, implement as well. It's always easier said than done, but I think, yes, that's by far my personal like suggestion to everyone out there to kind of like really read that book if anyone who is interested in basically building out great user experiences for any type of audience for that matter. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Ayush and Senthil. So before we end, we have a really interesting questions from one of our attendees here. So the question is like, how do you collect customer insights and feedback and measure the success of your product when we are in a design driven culture? So any frameworks and methods like Senthil or Ayush you would like to discuss on this particular question, like how do we really collect customer insights and feedback over a product in terms of design? Yeah,
I think Senthil, you should go ahead on this.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Let me take that. I don't want to put you in a spot there. So
yeah, absolutely. That's what I thought. I'm even scared to answer this. Please go ahead.
Absolutely, folks. Like I think what we follow, I can share my personal experience. Like we follow a maze internally. Like we will send out a survey with the user journey mapped, so people can use it with the real product before even while engineering is building. in the PDP process, but what we follow is like Maze certainly gives us that edge when it comes to validating our hypothesis, validating our user journey maps, or like relevant for their use cases, and how are they actually using it? Is there a way we can? So that gives out a heat map. That also gives out how much seconds they spent on that particular screens, and there is a contextual feedback questions for the user who's taking that usability study, like where they can give out like what they're thinking, why did they even spend so many seconds in that page, like was that not relevant for them, is it not clear? So there are multiple ways we can validate our design and like tie back to the insights. So I would probably recommend Maze, like which we currently follow, which well integrated with Figma. So yeah, that could probably help you on that.
Thank you, Senthil. I hope that very well answers the query of our audience. So yeah, thank you so much, Senthil and Ayush, for joining us today and sharing these wonderful insights with us. After this insightful discussion, we hope our audience is a little bit closer to their goal of designing for impact and answering the why behind every new product. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a very, very great weekend. Thank you, Ayush. Thank you, Senthil.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Surbhi. Okay, bye.